Have you ever felt like anxiety controls you, trapping you in an endless cycle of worries? What if I told you there's an ancient teaching that can help you break free from anxiety for good? Imagine being able to live with a peaceful mind, not ruled by fear or overthinking. In the next few minutes, I'll share a simple yet powerful lesson from the Buddha that has transformed millions of lives, teaching them to overcome anxiety, find calm, and experience true inner peace. But before we dive in, let me ask you, have you ever stopped to wonder where your anxiety really comes from? Is it something that's out of your control, or is it rooted deep within your mind? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll learn a transformative tool to deal with anxiety, and I promise you, it will change the way you live forever. 1. What is anxiety? Let me take you on a journey inside your own mind. Picture this, you're sitting at home after a long day, trying to relax. But instead of peace, your mind races with 1,000 what-ifs. What if I fail? What if something bad happens? The tension builds up, your chest tightens, and it feels like you're trapped in a cycle of worry. We've all been there, right? The overwhelming feeling that no matter what we do, anxiety has its hold on us. But here's the thing, what if I told you that this feeling doesn't have to control you? What if you could look at anxiety from a completely different perspective and break free from its grip? The first step in this journey is understanding what anxiety really is and where it comes from. Anxiety is one of the most common emotions that we all experience in our modern lives. It sneaks into our daily routines, at work, in relationships, even during moments of rest. Sometimes, it hits us unexpectedly, like a wave, drowning us in worries about things that may or may not even happen. We fear the future, worry about the unknown, and feel like we're constantly on edge. But what if I told you that anxiety is not something that happens to you, but rather something that arises within you? That's right. The Buddha, in his teachings over 2,500 years ago, pointed out something profound. Suffering, including anxiety, doesn't come from the outside world, but from our inner responses. Anxiety starts when we become attached to things, people, or ideas. We attach ourselves to the belief that our happiness depends on specific outcomes, whether it's getting that promotion, receiving approval from others, or having control over the future. And when things don't go as expected, or when we fear losing something we value, that's when anxiety takes over. Here's an example that might hit close to home. Imagine you're about to present an important project at work. You've prepared for weeks, but as the moment approaches, your mind races. What if I forget my lines? What if my boss doesn't like it? The anxiety builds because you're attached to the outcome, to the idea that your worth is tied to this one presentation. But the Buddha would ask us, why are we attaching so much significance to something that is beyond our control? Let's pause here for a second. Take a deep breath and think about a time when anxiety gripped you. Maybe it was a big decision, or perhaps it was a small worry that spiraled out of control. Now, reflect on what caused it. What were you attached to in that moment? Was it an expectation, a desire for perfection, or fear of loss? The Buddha's teachings help us realize that anxiety often comes from our attachment to things being a certain way, when in reality, nothing in life is permanent. Our jobs, relationships, even our thoughts and emotions are constantly changing. And here's the key insight, attachment to something temporary is what fuels our anxiety. This brings us to the next lesson, the teaching of impermanence, one of the Buddha's most powerful concepts. In Buddhism, everything is in constant flux. People, situations, emotions, everything changes. But our minds? We try to hold on to things, to control them, to make them permanent. That's the source of our suffering. Imagine for a moment that you're standing on a beach. The waves come and go, just like your anxious thoughts. They may be strong at times, but they always pass. The tide changes, the waves recede. Similarly, our anxiety is like those waves. it rises, but it doesn't last forever. It's when we cling to the wave that it overwhelms us. Now, I want you to imagine that each time anxiety comes up, you can practice observing it without attachment. Instead of letting it define you, you simply observe it, just like watching a cloud pass in the sky. You don't engage with it. You don't let it take over. This isn't about eliminating anxiety entirely, it's about changing your relationship to it. Anxiety doesn't have to be your enemy. It can be a signal, a reminder to practice mindfulness, to return to the present moment. And when you do this, you'll find that over time, anxiety loses its power. It becomes just another thought passing through your mind, not something that takes control of your life. So, I want to ask you, what would it look like if you started observing your anxiety instead of reacting to it? If you let go of the fear of losing control and embraced the idea that everything, including your emotions, is temporary? This journey of self-discovery is not easy, and it takes practice. But you're not alone. Every person who has ever struggled with anxiety can learn to move through it with wisdom. The Buddha's teachings offer a simple yet powerful way to do just that. Imagine if, instead of running from your anxious thoughts, you embraced them with compassion. Instead of judging yourself for feeling anxious, you treated yourself with the same kindness you would offer a friend. Imagine how much lighter you would feel, knowing that anxiety doesn't define you. It's time to take the first step. Join me on this journey of self-discovery. Through mindfulness, meditation, and embracing the impermanence of life, you can change your relationship with anxiety. As you do, you'll discover a new kind of freedom, a freedom to live in the present moment, to let go of what you can't control, and to experience true inner peace. If you're ready to explore more of these teachings and transform your life, I invite you to subscribe to Serenity Path. Together, we'll learn to cultivate a peaceful mind, embrace the wisdom of Buddhism, and discover how to live with less anxiety and more clarity. 2. The Buddha's perspective on anxiety. Let's continue this journey together. Now that we've explored what anxiety is, let's dive deeper into the Buddha's perspective on anxiety. If anxiety is something that arises within us, then understanding the Buddha's view of its root causes is the next step in freeing ourselves from its grip. Picture this: you're facing a difficult situation, maybe a conflict at work, or a family issue. The moment the stress begins to rise, you feel your body react, your heart races, your palms sweat, your thoughts spin out of control. But then, something shifts. You realize that this anxiety isn't just a response to the situation, but a reflection of your relationship with the situation. The Buddha taught us that our suffering, and that includes anxiety, doesn't come from the external world, but from our attachment to things, ideas, and people. I want to take you back to an ancient teaching from the Buddha. In his wisdom, he pointed out that attachment is the root cause of all suffering, including anxiety. But what does this really mean? Let me share a story to help illustrate this concept. There was once a young monk who lived in a small village. One day, he was meditating by the river when a traveler approached him, looking troubled. The traveler said, "I can't find peace. No matter what I do, my mind is always filled with worries. I fear losing what I have, and I worry about the future. I feel overwhelmed by anxiety." The monk smiled gently and said, "Tell me, traveler, what is it that you are holding on to?" The traveler thought for a moment and replied, "I hold on to my possessions, my work, and even my loved ones. I fear losing them." The monk nodded and said, "Exactly. Your anxiety arises because you are attached to things that are temporary, things that are always changing. If you continue to cling to them, you will suffer. But if you learn to let go and accept the impermanence of all things, your anxiety will lose its power over you." The traveler was puzzled. "But how can I live without holding on to anything?" The monk smiled again and said, "It is not about giving up everything, but about not letting your mind be controlled by these attachments. When you understand that everything, even your thoughts, is temporary, you can live with peace." This story highlights a key teaching of the Buddha: attachment is what creates anxiety. When we hold on tightly to something, whether it's a material possession, a relationship, or even an expectation, we are setting ourselves up for suffering. Why? Because everything in life is temporary. People change, situations evolve, and emotions fluctuate. When we attach ourselves to something that is impermanent, we become trapped in a cycle of fear and anxiety about losing it. Imagine this scenario: you're in a relationship, and you love this person deeply. But as time passes, you begin to fear that they might leave you. You start worrying about losing them, thinking, what if they don't love me anymore? What if something happens to them? The more you cling to the idea of this person being in your life forever, the stronger your anxiety becomes. You're not just fearing loss, you're clinging to the idea that things should never change. But this isn't the Buddha's way. In his teachings, he spoke of the Four Noble Truths, which help us understand that suffering is caused by tanha, or craving, this deep-seated desire to hold on to things. We crave permanence in a world that is constantly changing. The Buddha taught us that true peace comes when we accept the fluid nature of life and learn to live with less attachment. So, what does this mean for you, right now, in your life? It means that the anxiety you're experiencing may not be because of the external world or the people around you. It may be because you are clinging to something that is temporary. The more you try to control it or hold on to it, the more anxious you become. But here's the transformative part: you don't have to let anxiety control you. The Buddha taught us that we can break free from this cycle of attachment by embracing the practice of non-attachment. Non-attachment doesn't mean detaching from life or withdrawing from relationships. It means learning to live with a mind that is free from clinging. It's about letting go of the need to control everything, and instead, accepting that everything is impermanent, including your thoughts, your emotions, and your experiences. Let's pause and think about this. What are you holding on to that might be causing your anxiety? Is it a desire for control? A fear of losing something? Once you identify that attachment, you can begin to practice mindfulness and observation, two powerful tools the Buddha gave us. Mindfulness teaches us to observe our thoughts without judgment. When anxiety arises, instead of reacting to it, we simply observe it. We notice it without getting caught up in it. Anxiety is like a wave: if you try to fight it, it only becomes stronger. But if you observe it, acknowledge it, and let it pass, the wave fades away. I want to ask you, can you imagine a moment when anxiety strikes, but instead of getting overwhelmed, you simply watch it? Can you observe your thoughts like clouds passing in the sky? This is the power of mindfulness. And here's where the real shift happens: when you stop reacting to anxiety, when you stop attaching your happiness to temporary things, you free yourself. You learn to live with a mind that is at peace, regardless of the external circumstances. To wrap up this section, let's reflect on the Buddha's powerful teaching: attachment is the root of anxiety, and by practicing non-attachment, we can free ourselves from its grip. It's not about abandoning things or relationships, it's about freeing your mind from the fear of loss. When you do this, you'll experience the calm and peace that comes from understanding the impermanence of life. Imagine this: instead of fearing what might happen, you embrace life as it comes, knowing that whatever you have is temporary, and that's okay. You no longer need to cling to anything for your happiness. The world can change, but your peace will remain intact. In the next part of this journey, we'll dive deeper into practical steps you can take to apply this teaching in your everyday life. We'll explore how mindfulness and self-compassion can help you break free from anxiety and live with more clarity, peace, and freedom. But before we continue, I invite you to reflect: what attachments are you holding on to right now? What might you need to let go of to feel more at peace? Let's take a moment to sit with that thought, and when you're ready, we'll continue this exploration together. 3. The key teaching: impermanence, anicca. Let's continue our journey together. Now that we've explored the root cause of anxiety through attachment, we arrive at a concept that holds the key to breaking free from its grip: impermanence, or anicca in Pali. This is one of the most powerful teachings in Buddhism, and it holds the answer to transforming your relationship with anxiety. Imagine standing on the shore of the ocean, watching the waves roll in and out. The waves don't stay in one place. They come, they go, and eventually, they fade away. Now, think about your anxious thoughts in the same way. Anxiety, like the waves, rises, but it doesn't have to last forever. The Buddha's teaching of impermanence is based on the understanding that everything in life, whether it's the world around us or our inner experiences, is in a constant state of flux. Nothing stays the same. The people in our lives, the feelings we have, even our thoughts, they are all temporary. Everything is always changing. And here's the liberating truth: when we accept that impermanence is a fundamental part of life, we can stop clinging to things and start finding peace. Let me share a story that illustrates this beautifully. There was a wise monk who lived on a mountain. He was known for his calm demeanor and his ability to find peace no matter what happened around him. One day, a visitor came to him, looking troubled. "Master," the visitor said, "I feel overwhelmed. Everything in my life is changing. I fear the loss of my loved ones, my possessions, and even my own health. How can I find peace when everything around me seems to be falling apart?" The monk smiled and pointed to a flower in front of him. "See that flower?" he asked. The visitor nodded. "Notice how beautiful it is, how vibrant. But if you look closely, you will also see that it is slowly wilting. It is impermanent. Just as the flower is beautiful but fades, everything in your life is the same. It comes, it goes, and it is in constant change. The key to peace is to accept this." The monk continued, "You see, attachment to things that are impermanent is the source of suffering. If you learn to embrace the changing nature of life, you will find true peace." This story encapsulates the Buddha's insight into impermanence. When we cling to things, we set ourselves up for disappointment and anxiety, because everything changes, whether we want it to or not. The key to freedom is accepting change and recognizing that it is part of the natural flow of life. Now, I want you to take a moment and think about the things you are attached to in your life. Maybe it's a relationship, your job, or even a particular way of thinking. Ask yourself, what would happen if I allowed these things to change? The Buddha teaches that anxiety arises when we try to hold on to things that are fleeting. We fear that if we let go, we'll lose something important. But in reality, holding on to something that is changing is what causes suffering. Think about it, nothing in this world is permanent. Your feelings, your thoughts, your possessions, they all change. And the more we resist this natural flow of change, the more anxious we become. Take a moment to reflect on a situation in your life where you're experiencing anxiety. What is it that you're clinging to in that situation? Is it the need to control an outcome? Is it the fear of losing something or someone? When we try to control what we can't, we trap ourselves in a cycle of anxiety. But here's the liberating truth: the key to overcoming anxiety is learning to embrace impermanence. Instead of holding on to what we fear losing, we can practice letting go. This doesn't mean abandoning what we love or care about. It means not attaching our happiness to something that is temporary. It means allowing life to flow naturally, without resistance. Let's look at this from a practical perspective. Imagine you're in a difficult situation at work. Maybe you're feeling overwhelmed by deadlines or worried about a project's outcome. Anxiety creeps in, and you feel like you have no control over the situation. But when you remember the teaching of impermanence, you can take a step back. You realize that your anxiety is tied to your attachment to the outcome. You want everything to go perfectly. But perfection, just like everything else, is impermanent. The situation will change, and the feelings of stress and anxiety will pass. In this moment, instead of clinging to the need for control, you can choose to accept the natural ebb and flow of the situation. This doesn't mean you give up on your goals. It simply means you recognize that, just like the waves in the ocean, things will come and go. You are free to ride the wave, but you don't need to drown in it. Now, let's look at how this teaching can be applied in your daily life. 1. Recognize the impermanence of your emotions. when anxiety arises, remember that it is not permanent. Just as clouds pass across the sky, your anxious thoughts and feelings will come and go. When you embrace this, anxiety loses its power over you. 2. Practice letting go. When you notice yourself clinging to something, whether it's a thought, a desire, or a fear, take a moment to pause. Let it go. Remind yourself that nothing is permanent, and you don't need to hold on so tightly. 3. Live in the present moment. The more you embrace impermanence, the more you can live in the present. You don't have to worry about the future or dwell on the past. Everything you need is right here, right now. Let me offer a personal example to help solidify this idea. A few years ago, I found myself overwhelmed by a major life decision. I was stuck between two choices, and I feared making the wrong one. The more I thought about it, the more anxious I became. But then, I remembered the Buddhist teaching of impermanence. I realized that no matter what decision I made, it would be part of a constantly changing process. Even if things didn't go as planned, it wouldn't be permanent. I would learn and adapt. Once I accepted this, the anxiety lifted, and I made the decision with greater peace of mind. Acceptance of impermanence isn't about passivity, it's about active peace. You're not ignoring your thoughts or feelings, you're simply choosing to observe them without attachment. You're learning to let go of the fear that arises from the need to control the uncontrollable. In the next section, we'll dive deeper into how mindfulness and self-compassion can support this practice and help us navigate the challenges of anxiety with clarity and grace. But for now, take a moment to reflect. What in your life are you holding on to that you need to let go of? Let's take a breath together, and when you're ready, let's continue this journey toward freedom from anxiety. 4. Non-attachment, the key to freedom. As we continue this journey, we now arrive at one of the most transformative teachings from the Buddha, non-attachment. If you've been with me so far, you've already learned how attachment to things, people, or even ideas can be the root cause of anxiety. But what do we do with this understanding? How do we break free from the cycle of anxiety and suffering? The answer is non-attachment. Non-attachment might sound like a simple concept, but it holds the key to true freedom, freedom from anxiety, fear, and the constant struggle of trying to control the uncontrollable. Imagine living a life where you're no longer burdened by the weight of clinging to things that are out of your hands. Imagine being able to move through life with a sense of peace, regardless of what happens. This is the power of non-attachment. But what does non-attachment really mean? It's not about giving up on life, quitting your job, or detaching from relationships. It's not about being indifferent or aloof. Instead, non-attachment is about letting go of the need to control things, and learning to experience life as it comes, without being swept away by fear or desire. Let me tell you a story that might help clarify this. There was a man who had a beautiful garden. He poured his heart and soul into it, he watered the plants every day, made sure the soil was perfect, and spent hours ensuring that his garden would grow and flourish. But one day, a storm came through the village, and the winds tore down the plants. The man stood in the ruins of his garden, devastated. A wise old monk passed by and saw the man's distress. "What has happened here?" he asked. The man replied, "I've lost everything. I spent so much time and energy on this garden, and now it's all destroyed." The monk nodded and said, "You've attached yourself to the garden, but the garden, like everything else in life, is impermanent. It comes and goes. If you had seen the garden as a temporary gift, you would have enjoyed it without fear of losing it. Attachment causes suffering." The man was puzzled. "But if I don't care about my garden, what's the point of tending to it?" The monk smiled gently. "It's not about not caring, it's about enjoying the garden while it's here, knowing that it will change. Love it, care for it, but don't cling to it. By doing so, you can let go of the fear of losing it, and truly experience its beauty." This story beautifully illustrates the essence of non-attachment. It doesn't mean we stop caring or stop putting effort into the things that matter to us. It means we let go of the fear and anxiety that arise when we cling to things that are beyond our control. When we practice non-attachment, we are free to enjoy life as it is, without the burden of trying to make everything permanent. Here's the key insight: attachment to anything, whether it's a person, a possession, or even an outcome, creates a kind of mental prison. We fear losing what we have, so we cling to it, and in doing so, we become trapped. Non-attachment is the key to unlocking the door to freedom. Think about it for a moment. How often do you find yourself in a situation where you're clinging to an outcome? Maybe it's a project at work, a relationship, or even the desire to be happy all the time. The more you attach your happiness to these things, the more you increase the chance of anxiety and disappointment when things don't go as planned. But what if, instead of clinging to outcomes, you could embrace life as it comes, without the need to control it? What if you could be present with each moment, fully experiencing it, without the fear of what comes next? Let's explore how we can put this into practice. 1. Letting go of control. One of the most profound ways to practice non-attachment is to let go of the need to control everything around you. This doesn't mean you become passive or disengaged. Rather, it means you accept that some things are beyond your control, and that's okay. Life will unfold in its own way, and you don't need to fight it. The more you release the need to control, the more peaceful you will feel. 2. Embrace change. Non-attachment also means embracing change. Life is constantly evolving, and so are we. But instead of fearing change or resisting it, you can choose to flow with it. Every time something changes in your life, whether it's a relationship, a job, or a personal goal, remind yourself that this is just another part of the ever-changing cycle of life. Let go of the need to hold on to what was, and trust that what is to come will be just as valuable. 3. Non-attachment to expectations. We often suffer because we hold on to expectations about how things should be. We expect people to act a certain way, or for life to follow a specific path. When things don't match our expectations, anxiety creeps in. The practice of non-attachment teaches us to let go of rigid expectations and be open to the flow of life. When you stop demanding that life be a certain way, you free yourself from the anxiety that comes from unmet desires. Let me share a personal experience to make this more relatable. A few years ago, I was in a challenging situation at work. I had put a lot of effort into a project, hoping it would be a success. But despite all my work, things didn't turn out the way I expected. I felt frustrated, and anxiety began to rise. I wanted to control the outcome so badly that I was overwhelmed by my attachment to it. Then, I remembered the teaching of non-attachment. I realized that I was clinging to the outcome, hoping for success, fearing failure. Once I accepted that I couldn't control the outcome, I felt a sense of relief. I could still care about the project, still put in my best effort, but I no longer needed to control the result. I practiced letting go, and I found peace. The result? Even though the project didn't turn out as I had hoped, I was no longer anxious. I had freed myself from the mental prison of attachment, and I was able to move forward with a clearer mind and heart. Non-attachment isn't about not caring. It's about caring without clinging. It's about fully experiencing life, your relationships, your work, your joys, and your challenges, without letting them control you. When you practice non-attachment, you create space for peace and freedom, regardless of the external circumstances. Now, I want to ask you, what in your life are you holding on to so tightly that it's causing you stress or anxiety? What would it look like if you could practice letting go of the need to control? As we move forward, remember that non-attachment isn't about detaching from life, it's about embracing life as it comes, with open hands, not clenched fists. And with each step, you'll find more peace and freedom. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore how mindfulness and self-compassion can support this practice of non-attachment and help you build a resilient mind, free from the chains of anxiety. But for now, take a deep breath and reflect, what can you let go of today? When you're ready, we'll continue this transformative journey together. 5. The Buddha's Solution, Meditation and Mindfulness. We've come a long way on this journey, understanding the nature of anxiety, uncovering its roots in attachment, and learning to embrace impermanence and non-attachment as powerful tools for inner peace. Now, we arrive at the practice that brings all of these teachings to life, meditation and mindfulness. If the Buddha's teachings are a map, then meditation and mindfulness are the path we walk. They're not just abstract concepts, they are living practices, daily habits that gently train the mind to let go, to observe, to return to the present, and to soften in the face of anxiety. Let me tell you a story, one I think you might relate to. A few years ago, I met a woman named Lon during a mindfulness retreat in the mountains. Lon had a high-stress job in a major city. On the surface, everything looked perfect: career, family, success. But inside, she was unraveling. Anxiety followed her everywhere, on her morning commute, into meetings, even into her sleep. She told me, "I feel like I'm living in the future all the time, in a constant loop of what-ifs." It wasn't until she sat down in silence, during one of our first meditation sessions, that something shifted. She focused on her breath, just breathing in, and breathing out. For the first time in years, she was present. No planning, no panic, just now. That's when the tears came, not from sadness, but from relief. Lan's experience is a powerful reminder that freedom from anxiety doesn't come from trying harder, it comes from letting go, and mindfulness is how we learn to let go, one breath at a time. Mindfulness, as taught by the Buddha, is the practice of paying full attention to the present moment, without judgment, without resistance, and without clinging. It's about being here, not in the past where regrets live, and not in the future where worries grow. When we're mindful, we're not trying to fix anything. We're simply observing what is happening, just as it is. This includes observing our anxious thoughts without becoming them. Imagine anxiety like a thunderstorm. Most people run from the storm, or try to stop the rain. But mindfulness teaches us to stand under the shelter of awareness, listening to the thunder, watching the rain fall, knowing it will pass. You are not the storm, you are the sky that holds it. Meditation is the formal training ground for mindfulness. It's the practice of sitting still, turning inward, and observing the mind with clarity and compassion. Through meditation, we learn to notice the patterns of anxiety before they carry us away. Let me break this down into a simple image. Person in lotus position. Imagine your thoughts as cars on a highway. Most of us jump into every car that passes by. We speed off with worries, regrets, fears. But through meditation, we sit on the side of the road. We watch the cars. We don't have to chase them. We simply observe. That's where freedom begins, not in stopping the cars, but in learning that we don't have to get in. This is what the Buddha practiced under the Bodhi tree over 2,500 years ago, watching his thoughts, observing the sensations of the body, returning again and again to the breath. From that stillness came awakening. How meditation calms anxiety. Let's talk practically. How does this actually help with anxiety? 1. It breaks the cycle of reaction. Anxiety often works like a reflex. A thought appears, the body reacts, and before we know it, we're in panic. Meditation inserts space. It teaches you to pause between thought and reaction. That tiny space. It's your superpower. 2. It builds present moment awareness. Anxiety lives in the future. But your breath? Your breath is always now. Every time you return to the breath, you're telling your nervous system, we are safe. We are here. 3. It trains non-judgment. Meditation teaches you to notice thoughts without labeling them as good or bad. An anxious thought is just a thought. It doesn't define you. You don't have to follow it. Like clouds in the sky, thoughts come and go. You learn to observe, not attach. A simple meditation practice to try. You don't need a monastery. You don't need incense or mantras. You just need a quiet moment and your breath. Here's a simple practice to get started. 1. Sit comfortably. You can sit on a chair or cushion. Keep your spine straight but relaxed. 2. Close your eyes gently. Bring your attention to the breath. 3. Inhale deeply through your nose, exhale slowly through your mouth. 4. Begin to notice the sensation of breathing, the rise and fall of your chest, the coolness of the inhale, the warmth of the exhale. 5. When thoughts arise, and they will, simply notice them. Label them gently, thinking, then return to the breath. 6. If anxiety shows up, don't resist. Say silently, "It's okay. I see you." Let it pass like a wave. Come back to the breath. 7. Stay for 5 to 10 minutes. Set a gentle timer. End with a deep breath and a moment of gratitude. That's it. One breath at a time. One moment at a time. Mindfulness in daily life. Meditation is the training, but mindfulness is the way we live. You can bring mindfulness into eating, truly taste your food, feel the texture, be fully present. Walking, notice each step, the contact between your feet and the earth. Listening, really hear someone without planning your reply. Working, focus on one task at a time, with full attention. Each of these moments is a chance to come home to yourself, to anchor yourself in now, where anxiety loses its grip. I want to invite you, yes, you, to make this your practice. Not just something you hear, but something you live. You don't need to do it perfectly. You just need to begin. Start where you are. Sit. Breathe. Notice. That's enough. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. Each time you meditate, each time you return to the breath, you're walking a path the Buddha walked, and millions continue to walk, a path toward inner peace. So I ask you, are you ready to stop running from your thoughts and start sitting with them? Are you ready to find stillness within the storm? Take this moment, right here, as your first step. Breathe in. Breathe out. You're already on the path. So, there you have it, practical, timeless tools from the Buddha himself, ready to help you break free from anxiety's grip and start living with clarity and calm. By embracing non-attachment, impermanence, and the transformative power of mindfulness and meditation, you can create a life of peace amidst chaos. But here's the real question, are you ready to take the first step toward inner freedom? Your mind is more powerful than you think, and this journey to a peaceful mind starts with you. If this video resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let me know how you plan to apply these teachings to your life. Subscribe to Serenity Path for more transformative wisdom and practical tips that can change the way you live. Remember, peace is a journey, not a destination. Let's walk it together.